Recently, Pope Benedict concluded the year of St. Paul, a whole year of celebrations in honor of the great St. Paul, the zealous missionary of the first century, the writer of those letters or epistles that we still read at Sunday Mass, and of course the patron saint of the Paulist Fathers. But at the same time, the Pope announced that he was inaugurating a year of the priest, a year in which there will be a focus on the priesthood, who we are, and where we are going. So I thought it might be a helpful backdrop to the gospel that we've heard just now. The gospel begins with the great question. Jesus asks, "Who do people say that I am?" And then, "Who do you say that I am?" One of my pet theories that I often express in classes that I teach at the Catholic Information Center is this. In the 2,000 years of Christian history, there have been fundamentally only two major questions. The first is today's question: who is Jesus Christ? In the early centuries, the first church councils wrestled with this question. Who is this Jesus Christ? How does he relate to God the Father? And so the councils came up with the notion of the divinity of Christ and worked on the relationship between the human and divine in Christ, and in a sense came up with answers using, of course, terms of ancient Greek philosophy, terms that we still use in the creed we recite every Sunday. God from God, light from light, true God from true God, one in being with the Father. Now later on, in the 5th century, St. Augustine formulated the second great question, and that is, how is the individual saved? Okay. We've been wrestling with that ever since. As you may know, this was the central question of the Reformation. Luther and Calvin and the first reformers agreed with the church councils on who Jesus Christ was, but they were concerned with this question: how is the individual saved? Now, part of my pet theory, of course, is that we're beginning to lose some interest in that second question. You know, we're not worried so much about individual salvation, getting more interested in that question of who is Jesus again, especially that relationship between the human and divine in Christ. Now, of course, today's gospel, Peter gives the correct answer. He says, "You are the Christ, the Messiah." But then Jesus rebukes Peter because Peter doesn't want to hear this stuff about Jesus having to suffer, be rejected by the authorities, and be killed. So Jesus calls Peter and the other first apostles, the first priests, if you will, and he says, you know, as followers of the Messiah, you're expecting glory and triumph. Well, maybe true enough in the long run, but right now you're going to have to take up your cross and suffer with me. The year of the priesthood. I remember an incident way back in my days in the Paulist Seminary. I was having a conversation with Elwood Kaiser, who was a seminarian and 2 years ahead of me in class. Now later, Father Elwood would become famous as the Hollywood priest. He would produce the television series Insight, which appeared on many channels around the country for a number of years, and finally produced that great movie Romero. But I remember this time Elwood was saying to me, "John," he says, "as a priest, you're going to suffer." And they're going to say, "We priests, we're going to suffer." I remember saying, "Get off it, Elwood. What have you been reading lately?" All right. But now, you know, Elwood was right. I've been a priest now for 51 years, have no serious regrets. They've been great years, marvelous years, wonderful experiences, but I've had my share of suffering. Let me just tell you one story. In 1985, I was pastor of St. Thomas Aquinas University Parish in Boulder, Colorado. I'd been there just over a year when one October night, at 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. I picked up the phone. It was the police "Father, your church is on fire." And I looked out the window, and there it was, across the alley, flames and smoke coming out of the building. And by the next morning, it was a smoking ruin. Now, a whole long story began, which of course I'm not going to go into now, but as you might imagine, people rallied, volunteers formed new committees, and we dealt with all those questions. What do we do with the old building? Could we save it? Could we renovate it? Do we have to pull it down and build a new one? Or maybe, and how do we survive? Where do we have Sunday Mass? How do we get the parish agenda? How do we do campus ministry? Well, the story, though, I want to tell is this. Shortly after that, I got another telephone call. Some parishioners, a group of parishioners, wanted to meet with me one afternoon. So we set it up, and these 7 parishioners came in. We gathered around a big, long table, and for about an hour and a half, one after another, these parishioners began to denounce me to my face for my incompetence as a pastor, for not getting the agenda of the parish done, okay? So they blasted me for an hour and a half. Then at the end of that, they said, in addition, we're circulating a petition around the parish to Father Dewan, president of the Paulist Fathers, to have you removed as pastor. In fact, they ultimately gave me a copy of the petition with 27 signatures on it. It hurt. It hurt. On later reflection, yeah, these 7 had been insiders under the previous pastor. Their particular agenda wasn't getting done because we and most of the parishioners were into survival, and a counter petition got twice as many signatures, but it hurt. It hurt. So much for priests. So much for priests. You know, in today's gospel, we're told that after talking to Peter and the apostles, if you will, the first priests, he summoned the crowd. He summoned the crowd, and he told them, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and that of the gospel will save it." So you're going to have to suffer. You know, if you want to be a follower of Christ, you must suffer. But remember what Jesus had said earlier. He said that after he would be rejected by the authorities and killed, he would rise on the 3rd day. So if you want to be a follower of Christ, you will have to suffer, but you will rise. You will triumph.